and comprehend this, because it's saying the fiscal year, which ended on September 30th, we were at $21,516,183,180.23, $21.5 trillion in national debt. We're now $22 trillion. We've added roughly $500 billion to the debt just since September, folks. Just since September 30th of last year, we have, that is what? September, let's see, 3 months, 4 months, in 4 months, give or take a few days, we have added $500 billion. Guess what? It is increasing at a greater rate. And he goes on to say that he did actually run for Congress. He was not successful with that. He points out that Republicans have done just as bad, if not worse, in terms of spending and fiscal responsibility as the Democrats. He says in 8 of the past 11 fiscal years, the U.S. national debt has risen by more than $1 trillion. And again, now $21.52 trillion, now over $22 trillion. Says what we're doing is literally insane, and if we want our nation to survive, we must change course immediately. And he goes on to mention, by the way, the truth is that the budgets that have been passed by this government since Donald Trump became president are simply slightly revised Obama budgets. Let's see, he goes on, there's a point here from Ron Paul. I won't necessarily mention it for time's sake or go into it for time's sake. Just basically, again, talking about this $1.3 trillion spending bill that actually delivers socialism on a scale that Venezuelans couldn't even imagine, according to Ron Paul. The CBO, the Congressional Budget Office, now these estimates and these forecasts and what have you do change from time to time, and so be it. But the CBO right now is saying on the pace that we're on, the path that we are currently on, by the year 2048, the United States will be $99 trillion in debt. Now that's the national debt. As Snyder says, state and local government debt is at record levels all over the nation. Corporate debt has doubled since the last financial crisis, and U.S. consumers are more than $13 trillion in debt. Collectively, U.S. consumers $13 trillion in the red, the highest ever, and he makes a good illustration, Snyder does. If you had $13 trillion, you could buy every NFL team, every NBA team, every NHL team, and every Major League Baseball team, and that adds up to $191 billion, which still isn't anywhere all that close to $13 trillion. Folks, this just cannot continue. And I'm sorry, you can cheer for the president. I'm not, for various reasons. I'm not going to. You can support him. You can do whatever. And look, we all want as many people to be working as want jobs, good GPA or good GDP rates, high GDP, respectable GDP rates, percentages, unemployment rate. You know, those aren't necessarily bad things, but it is the debt that they continue to do absolutely nothing about. Quite frankly, because I think it was in that same article that if they did anything about it, if they actually stopped all the spending, that is kind of keeping the economy going, so to speak. And if they stopped it, then the collapse that's going to happen anyway. But the collapse would happen sooner. The incumbent politicians would get the blame. And, of course, they don't want any of that. Now, I've got about 10, 11 minutes here. Don't know if I'll get to everything. I've only got, I guess, a couple stories. I'll try to hit them, really try to high point them here, and we'll see what happens. Again, going to, I'll hit on the student loan debt. 11 facts about America's, this from Activist Post, about 10 days, or no, actually it was, or no, excuse me, I was looking at the date, about last September. 11 facts about America's wildly out of control student loan debt bubble. And again, let me just try again, hitting the high points for time's sake. Student loan, and they've got them bullet pointed here even. The student loan debt bubble has now grown to $1.4 trillion. We're hearing a lot of trillions, aren't we? $1 trillion of car debt, $1.4 trillion of student loan debt. In 2007, which was at the time of this article, 11 years ago, the total amount of student loan debt was actually less than half of that, $545 billion. Over the previous 10 years then, student loan debt from 2007 to 2017-18, student loan debt grew by a staggering 176%. Americans now owe more on their student loans than they do on their credit cards. And believe me, we owe a lot on our credit cards. In fact, I got in trouble years and years ago with a credit card, and I didn't even do anything that stupid with it. Just kind of life happened, but I didn't make any extravagant purchases. But it got me. It did. And I can admit it got me, and I haven't touched a credit card since. But in 2003, student loan debt accounted for just 3.3% of all household debt. Today, that number has grown to 10.5%, so in other words, basically tripled, if not actually more than tripled. The current student loan 90-day delinquency rate, 11.2%. 30% of all student loans are either in deferment or forbearance. The most common reason a loan is placed in one of those categories is because the borrower cannot pay. It is being projected that a whopping 40% of all student loan borrowers will default on their loans by 2023. From 2007 through 2017, college tuition costs jumped 63%, school housing surged 51%, and the price of textbooks by 88%. In 2001, 18.6% of all U.S. households, led by someone in the 18 to 34 age range bracket, were carrying household debt, 18.6%. Today, that number has jumped to 44.8%, and each year more than 1 million Americans default on their student loans. Now, let's see, how much time do I have left? I got about 7 minutes and change. And again, I'll hit on the high point of this and then try to wrap up. From ZeroHedge.com. Published last day of January here in 2019. So a couple weeks ago, as I'm bringing this to you here today, America's apocalyptic debt crisis. 63 of America's largest 75 cities are completely broke through debt and overspending. These 63 can't pay their bills. The total amount of unfunded debt among them is nearly $330 billion. Most of the debt is due to unfunded retiree benefits such as pension and health care costs. That means those depending on that money likely won't see a dime of it. This year, pension debt accounts for $189.1 billion. Post-employment benefits, retiree health care, $139.2 billion. Many state and local governments are not in good shape, you think? Despite the economic and financial market recovery since 2009, Bill Bergman, Director of Research at Truth in Accounting, told Watchdog.org. The top 5 cities in the worst financial shape are New York City, Chicago, Philadelphia, Honolulu, and San Francisco. These cities, in addition to Dallas, Oakland, and Portland, all received F grades. In New York City, for example, only $4.7 billion has been set aside to fund $100.6 billion of promised retiree health care benefits. Where do you think they're going to get the other roughly $95 billion? They're not. They're not. In Philadelphia, every taxpayer would have to pay $27,900 to cover the city's debt. In San Francisco, it would cost $22,600 per taxpayer to cover that city's debt. Actually, there was one more story. Again, I'll let's see, how much time do I have? 4 minutes, 53. Again, corporate debt. Again, the basic thing with this is from Forbes.com. Again, last August, U.S. experienced a dangerous corporate debt bubble. And basically, corporate debt is also at, if I'm not mistaken here and skimming it and reading it earlier, is at an all-time high as well. And basically what they're doing is they're accumulating all this debt, and they're doing it, and they're using it, they're borrowing. It is at an all-time high of over 45% of GDP, which is even worse than the levels reached during the dot-com bubble and the U.S. housing and credit bubble. So about 45% of America's GDP is what the corporate debt rate is at. And what they're doing is they're paying shareholders, they're doing stock buybacks, they're not investing it in anything that would either grow their businesses, lead to growth of the economy, lead to further, perhaps, future jobs. They're just borrowing money, hanging on to it to kind of save it in the event, almost like they know maybe something is not quite right with our economy. And you know what, folks? They probably do know something is not quite right with our economy. Look, I don't necessarily like to do shows like this, but I'm going to tell the truth, and I'm going to share the truth as I see it. And the truth is, whether you're an individual, and again, like I said, hey, I've learned this lesson. Whether you're an individual, whether it's the nation, whether it's state governments, city governments, you know what? The way that we get enslaved, I'll just nitty-gritty it. The main way we get enslaved by our enemies, by our global enemies, by our fleshly enemies, by our spiritual enemies, is through debt. The borrower, again, as it says in the Bible, the borrower is slave to the lender, as it also says in, I believe, Deuteronomy 28, Leviticus chapter 26. If we do things God's way, if we do our best to do things God's way, He's going to take care of us. But if we don't do things God's way, then guess what? The blessings are going to stop coming. The cursings, unfortunately, are going to start coming. And as part of that, the stranger, and again, call them whoever you will, but the stranger will be over us. Will be the tail and not the head, will be the borrower and not the lender. And all of that is going on. And I don't care. You know what? It really doesn't matter. It does not matter one iota who you elect to Congress, who you elect to the office of the presidency. It doesn't matter what letter they have behind their names. If they're all going to do the same thing, which is essentially nothing, then indeed America is not going to be great again. Then indeed America is going to be weak. And indeed America is going to collapse. You know, it's going to happen at one point anyway. And it's going to happen probably sooner than we know, or sooner than many are prepared for. That we're going to get swallowed up and we're going to go into captivity into that one world system. Be aware of what's going on. Don't get caught up in the partisan politics, even as I used to an extent. If you call yourself Christian, go by the Word of God first and foremost. Go by Him. Count on Him to be your wall. Count on Him to be your protection. Don't count on man. Man's going to let you down. Man lets us down. Our government lets us down daily. God never does. Look to Him for answers. Look to Him for protection. Look to Him for blessings. Not just for your nation, but for you personally. I'm Jason Hawes. This has been American Faith Today. And all of you, have a great day.
1, 2, 3, 4.